Awesome to have each of you with us today. When I count to 3, would you mind saying your name just so I can formally meet all of you? Is that all right? 1, 2, 3. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. I appreciate that. That works for me. I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm the Senior National Literacy Consultant for the McGraw Hill organization, and I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about some of the recent research that we've been operationalizing in our academic design departments, and as I work with districts across the nation and around the world even, kind of pulling on the pedagogical underpinnings and how things are sort of being woven together. This is a practical 55 minutes designed for anyone who supports scholars or the folks that support those scholars, be it at the building, the organization, the classroom level, or at the kidney table. Do you guys know what I mean when I say kidney table? You know, the little table where you have a group of scholars in front of you and you're working on listening, speaking, reading, writing, or thinking. This isn't a session where I'm going to walk through our instructional resources or curriculum in detail. That isn't what this is about. We're about the pedagogical underpinnings that we're using in developing those resources. I've been part of the development team for our most recent resource wonders, but my email address is on the screen. So if you want to have any conversations about anything, just reach out. We'll connect you throughout the organization. So, I'm not nervous. My hands shake because of a physical condition I have. And I've been with you folks in this area of the world for a week now, and it's my first time. I'm learning. I'm developing so much background knowledge and schema. I'm having such a great time. And I'm feeling well, but my hands have been shaking. It's nothing contagious. So I'm not using a clicker today because I would click through all the visuals erratically. So I'm going to walk up to the machine and go like this because I can do this really well. Is that okay? Say yes. I appreciate you saying yes. By the way, we're thinking of scholars that are about this tall to about this tall. We're thinking about what we would call K5 scholars. Cool? So you have some folks around you. It looks like some of you know some folks around you. Maybe you've come in with colleagues that you are honored to work with all along the way and at home or at school or wherever you're joining us online. Maybe you have some folks around you to chat with. We'd like to have a bit of collaborative conversation. If you're on your own here in the room or at home and you just want to use some page to write down some thoughts, feel welcome to participate in any way you like. But we want to engage everyone. There's a visual behind me, and I'm going to ask you just to notice the visual and talk together for a few minutes about how this might relate to literacy for K5 scholars. How might this visual relate to literacy for K5 scholars? And I don't mean to insult anyone today in any way, shape, or form, but I'm going to invite a scaffolded dialogue, if you don't mind. I would love for you to say with a colleague, be it in the bigger balcony or here in the room, as I look at this image, I'm thinking about literacy in this way. It makes me think that perhaps the strands represent. Is it okay if I scaffold the conversation like that? Say yes. Okay. And we'll just talk just a few minutes, but talk one with another. On your mark, get set, talk. K5. There is one for high school. Yeah, you're welcome. It's just down that way, about 3 or 4 rooms. ELA for high school. I'm not going to take it personally. Please be where you'd like to be. You guys okay? Are you guys okay? Are you folks okay? Yeah? Conversation good there? Oh, you're still, I'm watching the nonverbals. People are talking. They're doing it. Yeah. Right. Would it be all right if I was the only person speaking? Say yes. I don't mean to interrupt, but our time is short. What did you talk about? Anyone? What would you share with the group? Anything? What does the image make you think? Anyone? Right here.
I'm a first grade teacher, so for me, each strand represents a letter. When the strands come together, then we make words. And then they come more together, we make sentences. I think about it as a simple.
Oh, I love it. Tell us your name.
Jody.
Jody, could everyone say thank you, Jody? Thank you, Jody. Could you say it like you mean it? Thank you, Jody. Yeah, so Jody, do you mind if I sort of say what you said so that everyone can hear it? Jody's a first grade practitioner working with young literacy scholars. Am I saying that the right way? Sure. And she looks at each strand and she's thinking about a letter-sound connection. Perhaps each strand represents a different sound-symbol relationship, and that her young literacy learners need to have those sound-symbol relationships in order to move into literacy. Do I have it, Jody?
Yes, it's so important.
Very important. Without the sounds, they can't read. Everyone say yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Jody. What else was discussed at any of the tables? Anything? You say what?
Hi. Well, I teach grade 3, but I was thinking of literacy in terms of basically backgrounds of different people coming together. But literacy is basically the words of people all over the world, and that your access to different strands of thought and knowledge through reading.
Really powerful. Tell us your first name.
Hala.
Hala? And we all know what to do.
Thank you, Hala.
We appreciate you, Hala. May I paraphrase what you've shared, Hala? I'm not going to do this for every table, but it's good modeling so far, isn't it? Hala was sharing that the strands might represent voices of different folk that come together, and that literacy involves the connections of those folk, and speaking to sort of the diversity. Did I capture it? Okay. Right over here.
Ladies on this table, we were discussing that probably these strings are the set of skills that our little ones need to have and need to acquire in order for them to be successful and be able to have their literacy skills built and their words and their phonics created as they grow through K to 5.
Thank you so much. Tell us your name.
Lara.
Lara?
Yeah.
Oh, only Lara's people thanked her. We appreciate it. Lara, is it all right if I paraphrase? Lara shared that we were thinking, or they were thinking at their chat, that the strands might represent different skills. Yes, Lara? That readers, writers, listeners, speakers, and thinkers might need to carry. That was the word that you used. And I think it's powerful, but the image has the strands in the young scholar's hands. And whatever they represent, whether they represent the pieces that Jody shared, discrete skills that students need, or the bigger human connection, or the broader strategies that Lara brings forward, the fact is this is in the student's hands. And what we're learning as we're developing resources across the US and around the world is that with John Hattie's indicators of what moves students forward faster, owning collective efficacy, knowing what we're doing, when we're doing it, and why, moves us forward faster. Now, we're just becoming friends. We've only met just a few minutes. We've been together about 7 minutes. I hope it's apparent that everything that I've done since we started together has a purpose. And I'm trying to make that purpose universally known. Does that make sense? And that's what this visual, Scarborough's reading rope, developed in the early 90s, is doing to the conversation around the science of reading instruction in the US and, in fact, around the world right now. In the US, as you know, we've had pedagogical sort of wars over what should be included or emphasized in literacy instruction for some time. Same around the world. phonics or foundational skills that come to the fore, or is it about comprehension and deeper thinking? And in truth, it's all of those things well integrated. But when we look at it and we think about how we're leading our scholars or the people we're honored to support in our organizations, we can sometimes feel like this scholar might feel like, oh, it's all here, but I don't know quite how to organize it. Does that make sense? I appreciate you guys already. This is Scarborough's reading rope in visual. So think about these strands that have been in this young scholar's hands for a bit. And what this research group and this person has done is work together to organize the strands alongside of what the literature is calling a simple view of reading. And really, literacy is complex. It's all of the things that we've already talked about. But this is a clear way of looking at the things that our students need to know that they're doing, and we need to know that we're building, informed by assessments. As we design resources at McGraw Hill, we're thinking about each of the strands you're seeing behind me. Can I take a moment and ask you, am I boring you? Is this so old that you don't feel it's new, or are you intrigued? I heard intrigued. I'm over 60 now. I've lost a lot of stuff that I used to be able to do, but I can still hear. And I hear what I want to hear. Does that make sense? And I wanted to hear that you were intrigued. So you're intrigued. So let's take a moment, and I'm going to do two things that my Vice President, DJ, who you met earlier today, have told me never to do. Never point to the screen or talk to the screen when you're presenting. 20 years ago, he told me that. I'm going to do that now. There are the simple view of reading, this idea that language comprehension times word recognition comes together to equal skilled reading is a very simplistic and clear view. But what the literature is saying is, if I don't have the ability to comprehend language or recognize words, I can't be a reader. Does that make sense? And we have taught in some ways where some of these elements have fallen from where they need to be, and we're back sort of with all the strands knotted in our hands trying to figure out what to do. So let's think together. You could use this with the scholars in your building. If I was teaching second graders, I would use yarn. And I'd bring everyone up to my rug, and I'd sit on my stool, and we'd pull one strand of yarn out, and we would label the end of it, and we would learn what that piece of yarn is. If I was working with kindergartners, I'd have chenille rods, or pipe cleaners, we used to call them. You have them here too. They work the best because they hold their shape when you twist them. But we started in Saudi, and this is my first time in this part of the world, so I was really concerned reading the visa requirements. And as I read the visa requirements for Saudi, the first thing not to bring is rope. So I couldn't bring my yarn. And then I thought, well, I'll bring my pipe cleaners, and I started loading in pipe cleaners in my bag, and I just thought, I don't want to go through security with all these little wires. And so I've settled on what you see in front of you on your tables, these party streamers, crepe paper. So I've been flying all over the world with rolls and rolls of party streamers, and they work nicely. We are actually going into classrooms and building this rope, piece by piece, and it's powerful. I'm going to invite you to do the same thing, and at home or in the room at the ranch or wherever you're joining us online, you may not have your strips of paper like these, but you easily could. You just need 8, and they could be any color you want, but 8 different colors. So let's take a minute and talk about what we're going to build before we build it. We could start with the 3 word recognition strands, which some folks would consider foundational to all literacy, yes? They're labeled as phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. I'm going to ask you to talk at your table again. Notice what happens. Those 3 strands come together. Notice how the schematic represents them. Talk about what's happening with the strands. Go ahead and talk at your table. They are so noticing just the way the strands are put together, are they loosely connected? How are they connected? They're very tight. They're almost, I'm thinking of a word that starts with a BR, blend. Braided, thank you. They are indeed braided because these strands, phonological awareness, the ability to hear sounds in spoken language, phonemic awareness is a subset, of course, to hear the smallest units of sound in language, or decoding, the ability to work with the sound-symbol relationships, or sight recognition, the ability to recognize words and have them orthographically mapped when you're just looking at a word. Those three things work tightly together. And so I would invite you, here's the deal. You can do it in one group or two groups or however you want. At the front of your table, there are two pieces of black tape on the edge of the table. I'm all prepared, right? And there are your 8 colorful strands right here. You need to choose three colors, and braid those together tightly. Do you mind doing that? And as you're braiding, talk about what they represent. And I'll be listening in on your conversations about phonological awareness decoding and word recognition. On your mark, get set, braid. And yours are right on the table, and the tape's right there. And if you're working at home, folks in the room are thinking about how to organize 3 strands. They have one end caught together and they're braiding. Oh, I see it happening in the room. I'm noticing it takes more than one person to get it going. Right now we're doing word recognition, so this is the tightly braided strand of phonological awareness decoding and sight recognition, okay? Could be any color you want, but that's what they represent. How are we doing? Are we okay? Good? Good, good. All right. Friends, can we accelerate? Hold on to what you're doing and just look this way for a second, all right? You've taken 3 of your 8 strands and you have them going. Now I'm going to ask you to take the other 5 and get them going. Is that all right? Notice what happens with the other 5. Background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. They aren't braided. Yep. You can take your 5 others. They're twisted loosely. Do you see how they're twisted and not braided? So just twist them together. The other 5 strands. Yes, I can get you more tape. Notice my high-tech tape. Woo! Yeah, that's what you do, right? Do you guys need more tape, or you're all right? Look, I mean, this is beautiful. It takes a team to build literacy learners, yes? The twisting is kind of scary, but just trust yourself. You can do it. As you're doing it, it's becoming increasingly automatic, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, yep. As you're weaving and twisting, it becomes increasingly automatic. You become increasingly strategic. Now the two strands, the braided strand of the 3 and the twisted strand of the 5, need to come together somehow. How are you going to bring them together? And if you need more tape, I have some. Here's more tape if you need some. Not like my technique. There you go. Just pull. It's like you're pulling eyelashes. Are we good? Yes, yes. If you need more, that's good. How are we back here, friends? Good, good. Oh, look, Scarborough's reading rope. Can I read yours? Thank you. Can I have you back? Say yes. Would you be willing just to lay down your rope however it is? Just lay down your rope however it is. However it is, just lay it down. We can come back to it. Check that out. This is the table back here, their rope. I want you to notice the 3 tightly braided strands of phonological awareness, word or decoding, and sight recognition are here. They're wrapped around these twisted strands that are more independent and global in nature and can function sort of loosely and flow together. You see it? Those are background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. Can we stop for a moment? Whew. I still get like, oh. Don't you get that way when you work with your scholars? You feel like, oh, we're in it. Okay, what's good about what we've done so far? Yes. It's kinetic, multimodal, working with our whole selves, motor skills, collaboration. We're thinking deeply. You know, teamwork. You know, Dr. Doug Fisher, the senior author of our Wonders resource and the senior author of one of these senior authors of Study Sync down the hall for ELA, and a great thinker and friend, talks about visible literacy in his work with John Hattie, right? And we're seeking to make the known seeable here. I could work with my scholars and actually think about if I can label it and understand the label and how it interacts together, I can solve some mystery of what it takes to listen, speak, read, write, and think. So I want to say thank you, because in these 20 minutes, I think we've all done something that we could do again back at the ranch with any group we support, even ones that are this tall. It just means we have to think about the amount of modeling. It would be one strand at a time, and labeling and writing on the strand and using things that are more sturdy. But this is pretty strong. And that's a powerful piece, because left on their own, any one of these strategies cannot carry everything a reader, writer, listener, speaker, or thinker needs. Does that make sense? So for the rest of our time together before lunch, I wonder if we could just walk through these 8 strategies and follow a pattern. Here's the pattern I'd like to lay out, because our brains seek pattern. I'm going to start with the broader bands, because my action research has told me that we've, for so long in the US at least, been enamored with a conversation around foundational skills, as we should be, because we were lacking explicit systematic instruction and foundational skills, that the other bands, the bands related to language comprehension, have become shrouded in mystery or left out of some of our instruction. So I'm going to suggest that we would start with the top 5 there in my schematic and end our time right at lunch down in the word recognition strands. Are you comfortable with this? Now, the pattern will be just out of the literature, the blogosphere and deep literature, reading and the folks that we sit with and visit with as we develop resources. So high and low in research, I've just called together some language that can describe the strand in academic vocabulary that most scholars with scaffolding could get on and understand. And here's the secret. I don't know how exactly to say this. I've been married over 40 years. Here's what and I have a great relationship. She's flying in today. We're meeting in Jordan this evening for the weekend. How fun is that? This is what's really personal about that. We lost our youngest child not long ago, and his name was Jordan. And so now, this weekend, we're meeting in Jordan, which is really interesting and powerful. And our relationship works because I know that if I want to keep her happy, I have to renew my vow to do it the way I did it when I got her. Does that make sense? And so working together is the same thing with this stuff. We know this, but we need to renew our vow to be explicit about it, to recognize it, label it, and think about it. So we're going to label it, and then we'll share 3 strategies for each of, sometimes more, always at least 3 strategies for each of the 8, then you'll go to lunch. You'll have my email address. If you want the slides, just email me. If you want to continue conversations, I'm glad to be your friend. And there's a whole team of me, right? It's not just me. But let's start with background knowledge, if you would. All of the information and understanding students bring to the read that will help them gain a deep understanding of the text. I love this. DJ and I have had some conversations this week about learning loss. And I agree, learning loss is real. The challenge of the pandemic exacerbated that. Didn't he share 3 or 4 studies, one from Harvard and so forth, just this morning in the keynote? But also in the literature is a vital strand talking about that the hidden data, in some cases, in the pandemic and scholars working through it, is that it revealed strengths that we were unaware were there. I mean, think about managing the things that young scholars managed during remote learning and the skills that built. The stamina, the engagement, the determination, the organization, the executive behavior. I love to look at complex things through a strengths model. And so I love recognizing that background knowledge here isn't about the knowledge that the teacher brings to the discourse. It's about what the students carry. And mining the diversity of our lived human experience. I love that language. Mining the diversity of our shared and unique lived experiences and connecting that knowledge to the knowledge of the author. That's a powerful way to think about it. Our lives are unique one from another, but I'm finding that there are common elements that we can build together and connect with, right? And we need to be able to do that as we work. And we need to know that as we're consolidating and expanding our background knowledge, friends, speaking to my scholars, we're doing it so that we can know the full message that the author wants us to know. Because text is life-changing. Does that make sense? It's an elevated importance. So what are 3 things we can do? Excursions. Well, I've been on a mighty excursion the last 4 days. And I know a whole bunch now that I didn't know. I didn't know there was a Dubai Eye. Yes? Last night where they took us for dinner, we sat on a balcony looking at what I would have called as a child a Ferris wheel, but I don't think it's a Ferris wheel that moves, but it's a light show. You with me? I didn't know about a lot of things I've experienced. The excursion is enriching and expanding my knowing. So how can we bring excursions if we can't take our kiddos into the world? We can bring the world in for our kids. Videos are a great way to do that. Each inquiry-based text set exploration that we've built for K-5 scholars at McGraw Hill over the last decade starts with a video experience. And in our latest work, that short video, we've been inviting teachers to turn off the sound and to turn off the closed captioning. And the scholars look at the images they see moving on the screen and engage in narrative dialogue with one another as they watch. I listen in, hear the language that they bring, and lift it up for the whole group, refine it, spread it, pollinate it. Then we watch it again, because that's a model of a close reading protocol, by the way, re-listening, to go in for deep meaning, to check to see if what our inferences about the content were before the watch. You know, it's good stuff. And then to bring experts in. At coffee this week, I've learned more about life from you folk than I could from 1,000 books just visiting. The first lunch in Saudi, I sat down with folks and learned things about life. I was in a city that started with J, and then we went to a city that started with R, and then we came here and we went somewhere that started with A, and then yesterday we went somewhere that starts with an SH, and now we're back here in D. Yeah? Do you see how that was connecting the known to the new? Just by the way. So, experts are all around us. Invite your teachers and your students to share their expertise. The second piece is vocabulary. Looking at this from Isabel Beck. The quality and quantity of a student's known words to comprehend challenging text. Students need a wealth of vocabulary knowledge. The two words I love here are quality and quantity. The idea of thinking about which language moves me forward faster. I get to talk for a living. This is probably the most important thing I'll say in this hour. What we get when we squeeze students is what they've been soaking in. So important, I'll say it again. What we get when we squeeze kids or students is what they've been soaking in. When I was a little tyke, my mom put me in my car seat on the countertop beside the kitchen sink while she washed dishes, probably 5 nights a week. My earliest memories are of her with her hands in soapy water, and she's talking to me about the shape of the dishes and the color of the dishes, and we're playing I Spy, and we're counting forks, and we're counting knives, and I'm learning to talk and think and ask questions. And now I travel over and just talk so much that my kids say, please stop talking. But when I'm talking, I'm carrying my mother forward with me. Does that make sense? What we get when we squeeze each other is what we've been soaking in, and vocabulary is like that. To entrust our scholars to leverage the vocabulary that we model with confidence. The strategy here is to intentionally use the vocabulary the reader needs to know in order to navigate the text. To use it and entrust it to the use of the student. And that modeling is best done, and I love this strategy, restate to elevate. Now, you all are brilliant, far beyond me. But with intention, I modeled this a few minutes ago when Jody made her statement to the group, and then I restated it. I did it under the guise of making sure that everyone in the bigger balcony could hear through the microphone. But really what I was doing was restating. And if we're friendly enough, each time I tried to add more to what was said, to contextualize it, to enrich it. It was marvelous when you gave it to me. But my job is to make it even more beautiful and give it back to you. And wouldn't the world be better if that's all we did? Just gave beauty back and forth to each other, right? And that restating to elevate is a strategy that you can say with great clarity. Language structure. Are we bored? Is this worth your time? Is it good? Should we keep going? Okay, language structure. Sentence level. Now, language structure means a lot of different things in the literature. Right now, we're talking about language structure as it's understood as one of these strands in the rope, okay? It means sentence level comprehension of text, including how the arrangement of words within sentences impact meaning. That's pretty powerful. I love to sit with 10-year-old kids and put a great sentence on the interactive whiteboard and just sit. This is out of Jeff Anderson. Just kind of look at the text and ask them to talk with me about what they notice. Kids see amazing things. In their noticing, we can call out the grammar that needs to be taught, and if we carefully curate what we put up on the whiteboard, we influence effective readers and we build effective writers. But to think about the words within sentences, the language structures, we need to have two clarifying lenses. The first lens might be semantics, to think about how word choice develops meaning. So when I'm with those 10-year-old scholars and we're thinking about word choice in this sentence, you guys, this is a sentence from Patricia Polacco's book, Thank You, Mr. Falker. It's on page 89. Here it is. Why do you think Miss Polacco did this? She chose the word burly. Whatever could that mean? Let's look at the illustration beside the word burly. Let's think together about what other words. And then I have my shades of meaning words on paint chips. And we decide, could Ms. Polacco have chosen a different word to make the sentence do something else? About word choice, that works. And then syntax, the grammatical rules of language. And this works for me, at least. I don't know if this is even grounded in real research. It's just an impression. When I'm really nervous to speak with power, I verbally rehearse. Does that make sense? Even after all these years. So I have multiple tracks in my head, and even right now, the track of what I'm about to say is playing, and I'm listening to it, and I'm saying to myself, does it sound right? Will it be inviting if I say it this way? Will it be clear if I say it that way? How could I make it more clear? That ability to hear language and boil it down to, does that sound right, helps kids with all kinds of grammar. We need to explicitly teach the grammar rules, yes, the processes and what's appropriate. But the best way to make sure that's working is to be attuned to text that uses proper grammar. To speak under the influence of what we've heard said or read. Does that make sense? Next one is verbal reasoning. In several of the rooms this week, some instructional leaders have asked me to do verbal reasoning first when they see the rope, because that's the one that had less clarity for them. Verbal reasoning, to make meaning from text, and this is from Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, to make meaning from text, going beyond text to make deeper meaning, and this is the phrase that matters, and to explain it verbally. Not to hold our thought in mystery. And I hope you won't think poorly of me. I had I think a 14-hour flight from where I live in Seattle to Istanbul, something like that. And when I got to the airport, I didn't have a book to read. And I walked through the bookstore, and I bought Spare, which is Prince Harry's autobiography. Whatever, it's a good read. It's actually very well written. And I took the cover off of it and threw the cover away. It's just a black book. I'm carrying it through the airport. And the whole first chapter is about Prince Harry's experience during his mother's funeral. And he's writing about the sounds he heard as he was walking with his brother and his grandfather and his father behind her. Very powerfully written, by the way. And now that I'm in the middle of the book, I find myself reaching back to what he wrote in the beginning, and I'm understanding why he's moving in the world the way he's moving now is rooted in the trauma of that experience. Does that make sense? And that is something that I talk about with my Thursday night book club. Does that make sense? I use verbal reasoning with my book club in Zoom from wherever I am. And that's what I'm going to bring about Harry this week. And they're going to think I'm so brilliant. And it is the way I'm understanding text. Here's the strategies. To talk, to understand inference, and to find logical coherence or connection in text. To teach each other figurative language. Did you hear what I said? To teach each other figurative language, metaphor, and idiomatic expression. I love to keep an anchor chart of idioms. The anchor chart is just all the idioms my group of scholars happens to hear or use. Someone brings it up to the chart. We illustrate it visually. We explain it another way. We put the scholar's name next to it. And we're always going back and building, and I call it an idiom alert when I hear one. And kids in my world go crazy just trying to bring an idiom that we can't figure out. Something unique to their lived spoken experience. These pieces are key to accessing text. We use word games, and we think about backward inference. Forward inference, as Dr. Fisher writes, involves prediction, and we're all used to predicting when we're working through text with students. But if I ask students, what factors early on in the text that Prince Harry has written are impacting him right now on page 357? That's a backwards inference. Does that make sense? And then to complete knowledge gaps. Back when we were on the screen, and I'm going to race back there, we were on verbal reasoning. But when we look at this, there's a knowledge gap. The visual goes off the screen, and we can't really see what happens when they truly wind together. That's a knowledge gap. To leave space for people's knowing to come into the work is what they're writing about. And authors do that. They leave spaces for us to come in and finish the story. Now, what was I on? Oh, you're so good. Thank you. Right? And we're done with it. Can I keep going? Okay. Literacy knowledge. This idea of all the ideas we know are true about language, books, and the text within them. We've started adding opportunities for students to talk about this with each other, rather than just telling or assuming that students bring knowledge of books or text. We need to unpack it. Teach the purposes, features, and conventions of text. We all do that. Build across students' lifetime. Every Thursday that I'm home, my youngest granddaughter is Meredith. Her mother goes to recess duty. I leave my house. I walk about a half a block. I go in their back door. Meredith meets me. She says, "Hello, Tot." That's short for Tata. She calls me Tot. I say, "Hey, how are you, Mare Bear?" And she says, "Let's read." And we go to her space. We get some books. I get down on the floor, grunting. She laughs. And I say, "Okay, read to me." And then what we're working on is how the book works. And it's not upside down and goes from left to right. And the pages turn this way. And all of that stuff, the directionality, the concepts of print, then builds to deep and wide awareness of genre, and then to even write under the influence of that text. These are strategies for literacy knowledge. Now, our time is short, but we have the 3 remaining strands. I've talked a lot. Before we wrap the braided ones up, can I just ask you, what are you thinking about? Anyone? What are you thinking about just now that you'd be willing to share with the group?
Well, I've been thinking it's very interesting to revisit all these thoughts, but as an English as a second language teacher, I've been thinking about how this applies in terms of using texts and things that are outside maybe our students' immediate experiences and their vocabulary background and all of these things, how we can bridge that, how this carries over sort of to teaching children who don't have the background that we need.
I really appreciate you bringing that forward. Tell me your name. Hala. Yes, we met already. What do we need to say?
Thank you.
Yeah. So Hala brings up this fact that we have the great opportunity to support multilingual learners or learners that are developing English. And Hala's been thinking about this, the 5 that we've been speaking about through the lens of how to engage and equip and invite students who have a primary language other than English and are coming into English, if you would. And Hala, I'd like to just say a couple of things, if that's all right. Is this all right with the group? We've been working with Dr. Jenna Echevarria for a number of years. Dr. Echevarria is the author of, or one of the developers of the SIOP model, a model that helps make input comprehensible, probably one of the most important protocols for planning lessons for English language or multi-language learners of the last 30 years. And Jana, and you can email me and I'll give you Jana's background, the best title that she just wrote. It's a really simple little book about how to reach kids that are difficult to teach. It's just good stuff, written with Doug Fisher, by the way. Jana talks about a couple of things to create safe space for verbal rehearsal. Now, I want you to think about how many times we did that in this hour. I ask you to talk about the development of the rope. Before I said, might anyone explain verbal reasoning? I set up opportunities for safe verbal rehearsal prior to taking the whole stage. And what made that safe is that I was there to intervene, clarify, and scaffold. Does that make sense? Another little key, and I know there are reams and reams of books, but I'm just sharing 3 things that are high leverage. To plan with intentional redundancy. So we've said the same thing over and over each time 3 or 4 ways. And we've checked frequently for understanding, which is great teaching. The other thing I did a few minutes ago with the cities that I came through, that verbal close, verbal C-L-O-Z-E, is a great multilingual strategy, and I get to decide how big or how little or how frequent the space is that I invite the learner into that spoken language. With you folks, you knew more than I, frankly, it's because I couldn't remember the names of the city. So I said, oh, I know it starts with a J, and you all said Jenna. And back home, I would have to say Jed. My space would be bigger, and their space would be littler. And that mediation is the key to framing in a way that brings people in. Does that make sense? And I know we could talk forever, so please email me. But those are 3 high leverage things. Anyway, thank you. We've been thinking then deeply about those 5 strands. Let's wrap up our time together and think about these key foundational pieces. Phonological awareness, a skill set that includes hearing, identifying, and manipulating units of oral language such as phonemes, onsets, rhymes, syllables, and words. We know this like the back of our hand. If you need one good book to read, A Fresh Look at Phonics by Wiley Blevins. It's about 2.5 years old now. But Dr. Blevins takes the International Literacy Association's statement on powerful foundational skills instruction and breaks it down sort of into 8 key strategies. And one of the things Wiley says is that phonological awareness is a prerequisite skill to phonics. We know that, but a lot of teachers don't teach that way as I visit classrooms. They jump right into letter-sound connection and don't honor the primacy of the fact that if we can't hear the units of oral language, we can't begin to assign sound to symbol. Does that make sense? And so phonological awareness is imperative. Phonemic awareness is just a subset of phonological awareness that has to do with phoneme knowledge. But as I travel across the US and I put 3 terms on the table, or 2 terms, if I put phonological awareness on the table and phonemic awareness on the table and phonics on the table, and I say discuss, many of our first grade teachers in the US don't have a clear conversation about what those 3 things are and why they're different. This could be a really good helpful point with the people that we support, or our neighbor next door, or better yet, the 5-year-old person we're leading and needs to know what they're doing when they're doing it and why. Does that make sense? So what do? We sing. We use rhythmic language. The other night on the plane from Saudi to wherever we came next, here I guess, yeah. There were 5 little girls under 8, 2 parents, 2 grandparents, and a nanny in the row behind me. And the girls were enchanting. And they were singing this song with each other. Luna, Luna, come tuna is the song, over and over and over for about 10 minutes. And I loved it because that's the same song that my father-in-law sang to my boys 38 years ago in Southern California. And I was like, well, here it is on a plane. And so when we got off the plane, I talked to them about that song. Those rhythms stay with us, and that language is helpful. Verbal wordplay, and of course, auditory segmenting and blending. And then finally, decoding, a reader's ability to apply knowledge of sound-letter relationships, or phonics, to correctly read and pronounce written words. These are just great descriptions. That one's from Wonders. Here are some strategies for decoding. To implement consistent sound symbol routines. To emphasize segmenting and blending. Dr. Blevins talks about segmenting and blending as being high leverage. To use decodable text. When I came into the profession, decodable texts were out of vogue for a bit. There can be decodable text that carries meaning and engages learners. And then to think about the frequency, duration, and intensity of our decoding or phonics instruction. Meaning, there's a long I sound, and that long I sound could be spelled in 6 or 7 different ways. Less intense instruction introduces all those spellings at once and asks the learner to work with you to figure it out. More intense instruction introduces one spelling at a time and uses a routine to practice that until the learner has it at mastery. And every learner benefits from something along that continuum. But we should be able to think about the intensity of our phonics instruction. And I've met a lot of folk who can do that, and it's exciting. They've taught me how to do it. It's good. And then last thing, sight recognition. How a reader immediately recognizes or identifies a word and its meaning within a sentence. That word is already orthographically mapped. I don't have to think about it. It's at, it's the, it's was, it were, it's my name. right? It lists for the learner. What can we do? Craft sight word anchor charts, notice and annotate sight words within text, and code sight words during writing instruction. All of this stuff is built into Wonders, built into StudySync, and here's my email address, and thank you very much. I think our time is right, yes? So are there any questions, wonderings? Thank you.